Platform வச்சிருக்கீங்க சார். ஒரு பிளாட்ஃபார்ம் வச்சிருப்பீங்களே கிடையாது இல்லையா? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly take your seats. We will begin the program now. Can I invite Mr. T.R. Kesavan, President, Dr. V. Malini Shankar, IAS, retired Vice Chancellor, Indian Maritime University, Mr. J. Krishnan, Governing Council Member and the Chairman of the International Cooperation Committee and past Chairman of our Logistic Committee, and Mr. Uday Bhaskar Reddy, Co-Chair of the Logistic Committee, to come to the head table, please. Please give them a hand. The Madras Chamber is 188 years young chamber and quite tuned to the current requirements, and one of our passionate subjects is the ports, logistics and things like that. And also they say when disaster strikes, the time to prepare has passed out. That's what happened when the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore collapsed after the container ship Delhi struck it. But what is important is that even after the disaster, the lessons can be learned so that we can at least mitigate or avoid the next disaster. So that is the very idea we are having it here, and thanks to all of you for joining. So we would begin the program with the welcome note from Mr. T.R. Kesavan, President, Madras Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I require all of you to put your mobile phones on the silent mode. Otherwise, if all the phones start ringing, it will be a greater disaster. Mr. Kesavan.
Thank you, Saraswati. In fact, I think it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you here. And let me take the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Malini Shankar, IAS, Vice Chancellor, Indian Maritime University, as our keynote speaker for the day. Thank you, Madam. And Mr. Muthu Jagannath, Director, NAU Private Limited, Singapore. Mr. Amitav Majumdar, saw him sitting here. Yes, Amitav Majumdar, Managing Partner, Bose and Mitra and Company, Bombay, as a moderator for today's session, and Mr. S.N. Srikanth, CEO and Senior Partner, Hor Associates, and representative from our co-host of the Association of Multimodal Transport Operators of India and Federation of Freight Forwarders Association of India. All the MCCA Managing Committee members and all the other participants, once again let me welcome to the session of Lessons from Baltimore, Risks and Claims. See, disruption to any global supply chain is always painful. I think you don't have to think about it. The reason is there are two ways to look at it. And there's always two parts to any untoward incident. One, the first question always comes to the mind is, was this avoidable? How can we prevent this in the future at least? And the second is the aftermath. Comes the compensation, who, how, when and where, all those kind of stuff. This is very common. Any event at faraway geographic locations today actually impacts the common man in the distant lands. See, in the earlier we don't probably seen it, but now any small disruptions, somewhere else it actually ripples down and everybody gets affected. And we know the Suez blockade, what has happened, and then also the Delhi incident in Baltimore, we are going to talk. And I think one of the biggest worrying areas is also the political fallouts. what is happening and the Maritime's routes getting disrupted. We are seeing it very often. All of us are suffering it because of that. And today, I think we are really going to talk about and tend to debate always the second part, the aftermath of such incidents. Occurrences of such intensity also serve as a wake-up call. I mean, that's what I always tell people. Look, something like this happens. Immediately what we really look at it is, hey, something has happened and are we going to go? How are you going to get compensated? What are the legal options available both for the affected and the other parties who actually claim to resist such claims? I mean, it's very common. Something happens, there are two parties, sometimes there are more than two parties. And the application of both domestic and international laws comes for deep scrutiny and also vigorous debates across the globe. And that is also a thing which we very commonly see. The law can be pretty complicated when it comes to international, when you have different countries coming into, countries trying to discuss. And many a times, I don't know how many of you realize it is, sometimes what actually settles a lot of these problems is arbitration than the law itself. Now, the Baltimore incident is a very complex situation where the multiple affected and multiple defendants are there. The owners of the cargoes who have no role to play are also being called upon to foot the laws. I know there are some experts who will probably throw a lot of light to it, why this happens. I mean, people tell me, I only send the cargo, why am I asking people are asking us to compensate? And the city makes claim for the lost economic interest and claims arising after delays and damages, obviously, loss of life, and the list goes on. See, MCCA is very happy to take up this aspect with the help of the domain experts today here to understand the legal provisions and also consider the risk mitigation measures for the future. Trade needs to adjust their sails constantly to retain its efficiency, and a clear understanding of cross currents will help us to plan the way forward. And I'm sure that the brilliant minds we have here today, they will be able to throw some light so that many of us can learn and hopefully adjust it for the future rather than if we can do something for the day or not. As I said, there is always a reaction. I also like to emphasize actually on the first, something happened and then there is a reaction, the easiest thing. The question is, what I said first, is this avoidable? How can we prevent the future occurrences? Let me just go back to the bridge which was built in 1977. I think that was the Baltimore bridge, the second Baltimore bridge, if I remember right. The old Baltimore is probably 100 odd years earlier than that, where the sea ferries were small and manageable. As years went, the bridge became old and the ships became formidable. Now the question here is this an accident in making? Today I know there is one set of people, the city claim that they have lost economic interest. I'm actually throwing a question down the table here. Is the city owners also responsible for it? I mean, you have an old bridge, which is reasonably narrow for the big, formidable ships. And was there a warning bell somewhere that a catastrophe can happen? Have you looked at it? I mean, I'm not only asking them that question. I'm sure a lot of things can happen in the future of this similar kind. So the question is, are we looking at what are we using, where is it going, how things are, and is there any need to adjust today so that we can avoid tomorrow's problem? Because fundamentally one thing is very clear. Any insurance works if the losses are small percentage compared to the money paid. And this is the biggest problem I think we are going to. Is there a doctrine anticipated? And question of doctrine of anticipate and prevent, is it happening? Because it's very easy to blame later. But is the corrective action upfront available? MCCA is one of the premier industrial promotion organizations in southern India and is currently into our 188th year. And we serve the trade and industry as several expert committees who act and think as think tanks in our and their respective domains. The expert committee on logistics, which is now people are sitting right on the dais, they are very active, and a number of issues concerning policy, infrastructure, procedural and administration for the development of existing business have been taken up for deliberation at different points of time, and valuable sessions are emerged out of that kind of discussion. The logistic committee decided to have an exclusive session to have an overarching compensation. Sorry, I always come, when you talk, compensation comes. I'm very sorry about it. It is comprehension. Okay, the overarching comprehension of the Baltimore incident. This would help us to grasp the entirety of that event, as I said, including the causes, the consequences, and the broader implications. And this timely program was organized to understand the risks, claims, compliances, and also how can we avoid it in the future. We have a keynote speaker and experts who would elaborate on this. I'm not an expert, and I think I'll love to hear them out, and I don't want to give statistics or technical facts of something which I don't know anything about. I once again welcome our guests, welcome our keynote speaker and all the speakers present here. And I've noticed that today we have a completely filled auditorium, and I'm really happy to say and wait to hear and learn out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for setting the tone and also throwing open a lot of questions. I'm sure the keynote speaker and the panel that's going to follow are going to take up some of these questions, or at least many of these questions, for discussion. Thanks a lot. We would now like to present a small plant, a cool plant in the hot weather, to our chief guest, Ms. Malini Shankar, Dr. Malini Shankar IAS. I request Mr. T.R. Kesavan, President, to present the same. This program, we should be very honest and acknowledge the role played by Mr. J. Krishnan, our logistic committee, former chairman and the current governing council. In fact, he was the one who started this discussion in the meetings and said, probably this requires a lot more detailed discussions on the subject and deep dive. So I would request Mr. J. Krishnan to introduce our chief guest and say a few words now.
Very good afternoon. I would restrict myself just to introduce Mrs. Malini, because I do not wish to stand between the expert discussion that's going to follow an introduction. Profile of Dr. Malini Shankar, an IAS officer of the 1984 batch. Dr. Malini Shankar is currently the Vice Chancellor of the Indian Maritime University. She is an honorary member of the Board of Directors of the World Maritime University, having been nominated by the Director General, International Maritime Organization. Dr. Malini Shankar has held key posts in a 4-decade-long career. I still fondly remember the days when MEPs, we used to interact and have a lot of fights also in those meetings. She was also the Director General of Shipping on the rank of Secretary to Government of India prior to her superannuation, and she was also the chairperson of the National Shipping Board from 2020 to 2023. She obtained a doctoral degree in Institution of Economics from the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras Chamber, India, and a management degree from the Asian Institute of Management, Manila, Philippines. She was selected in 2020 as one of the 7 global recipients of the AAA award by the Asian Institute of Management, Manila, Philippines. And I'm very happy to say she is the first Indian woman to receive this award. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to listen to Dr. Malini Shankar.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that warm introduction, Mr. Krishnan. The Vice President of the MMA, Ms. Saraswati, who I know from my days in MEPS. And it's lovely to see a large gathering for this afternoon session. Thank you very much for having invited me and giving an opportunity to say a few words. But at the outset, I must confess, I am not the expert on shipping or on these Baltimore accidents. I'm neither a marine engineer nor a shippie. I think the experts are all sitting there in the first row, and we'll hear from them. Having said that, just an introduction, all of us know that more than 90%, maybe even 95% by volume, and more than 75% by value of goods are traded through ships. And therefore, it contributes a huge lot to the national and international economy and influences the dynamics, international dynamics. Let's look at this incident we are talking about, Baltimore. A cargo ship named Dali collided with the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, causing a significant portion of this 1.6 mile long bridge to crash into the river. Now, this incident occurred at 1:30 a.m., as we all know, on the 26th of March 2024, as the ship was navigating the Patapsco River. A construction crew was working on the bridge to fix potholes. Now, when I read this, I said, oh my God, even US bridges have potholes. That was one of the things which struck me. And they were the casualties. And the water temperature was reportedly 8 degrees, so they couldn't survive. Since the incident occurred at 1:30 a.m., the number of casualties remained low and countless lives were saved, considering that this bridge is used by 30,000 people on a daily basis, on an average. The Baltimore City Fire Department described the situation as a mass casualty multi-agency event, quote unquote. The Dali is a Singapore flagged vessel owned by Grace Ocean Private Limited and managed by the Synergy Group and sailing under the charter of Danish shipping company Maersk. The vessel, just to give a few details, is 948 feet or 289 meters long and weighed 112,000 tons, and it was carrying over 4,620 TEUs of cargo, and it was outbound from Baltimore to Colombo. The ship reportedly lost propulsion, leading to the collision. The port of Baltimore is one of the smallest container ports in the northeastern seaboard of the United States, and it handles a tenth of the volume of the cargo which passes through the port of New York and New Jersey. Even given the volume of water transport in the region and number of bridges, it's reported such events in that region are extremely few. A study by the Coast Guard of the US in 2003 revealed that between 1992 and 2001, there were 2,692 ship accidents with bridges in the United States. On an average, this amounted to 5 accidents a week on an average. Yet, over 85% of them led to zero or minimal damage. This is the background. Now, what is a report coming out? Says there was power failure, not once, but twice, which is surprising considering the ships in these days, and this was not a very old ship, it was constructed by the Korean shipyard in 2015. They are built with several layers of redundancy. The vessel is said to have experienced electrical issues even before it left Baltimore port. Alarms were reported to go off on the ship's refrigerated containers while it was still docked. Now, there are other possible reasons which are being reported, which include fuel quality, clogged filter, human error, and traveling too fast to change the course in just a matter of few seconds. Now, evidently, an accident of this magnitude leads to extensive root cause analysis by the National Transportation Safety Board, which is the NTSB. Now, this analysis is to understand what went wrong and how to prevent things in the future. An article on marylandmatters.org alluded to the Coast Guard's laxity in analyzing accidents. This is interesting. It says a total of 424 reported incidents of large ships losing power in the US waters, and with 103 of them occurring near a port, a bridge, or other infrastructure. And they say the Coast Guard has not applied its mind to analyze these accidents. What are its implications? Barclays analysts estimate claims of up to $3 billion on account of bridge damage, wrongful deaths, and business disruption. Major insurers and reinsurers are obviously going to face significant claims. The cost of salvage itself is going to be enormous. The owners of the ship have now reported to have declared general average. Now, this concept of general average, according to the concept of general average, all parties involved in the voyage must bear the losses jointly. Now, since it's such a huge loss, the owners have said, claim to declare general average. Other implications include supply chain disruption. Although it is not as major as the disruption caused by Suez Canal incident in 2021 or attacks on the merchant vessels on the Red Sea, it definitely raises issues concerning third-party risk management strategies, including business impact analysis. Now, how much of it is being done is the question. What are the implications of investigation? Now, it's reported that the FBI has boarded the ship to see if any federal laws were broken. The federal authorities leveraged an old statute known as seaman's slaughter to prosecute people they believe to have been criminally negligent. So they're looking at a criminal investigation which runs parallel with the non-criminal investigation of the National Transportation Board. Now, this part is a cause of concern for most masters as they can apprehend pending the invitation. They can be apprehended pending the investigation, and the investigation itself can take a very long time. And this will be in an alien surrounding for the crew, often with very little support, legal or financial, although most companies do support the crew in such major incidents. Now, what are the solutions suggested? Among the various solutions, saying one is reinforcing bridge piers and constructing bridges with a lot of protection. Now, that is going to increase the cost of the bridge construction. The other major suggestion is extending the length of time that a tug has to accompany the ship until it is clear of all critical infrastructure. This is considered to be inexpensive when you think that it can cost over $20,000 a day for a ship to wait for a berth. So this is the suggested solution. Now, all the solutions which are being suggested are technological and operational. That is the way it is bound to be. But I do think that the human aspects also deserve attention. Now, a gathering like this, or the shipping companies and the entire supply chain will be necessarily concerned about the trade, the loss in trade, the insurance, the aftermath of it. But I would like to even, I think the human aspect deserves a certain amount of attention. Understaffed, overworked, facing multifarious compliance requirements, cost-cutting advice from their principals very often. The crew comes under extreme stress. I think that they deserve some attention side by side with the trade losses and the compensations. In the Indian context, I can say, because the question is, what are the lessons we are learning? In the Indian context, the Director General of Shipping publishes accident investigation reports periodically. It was being published every 3 years. The question that came to my mind as DG Shipping is when I asked for the reports, it had to be searched for, whereas it should have been readily available. How many of them have read it? Very few. The report is very, it talked about like the 3-year report between 2016 and 15 and 18 had about 70 plus accidents. So they obviously can't give the entire case study in detail, but it deserves a more intense reading. So people hadn't read it. Now, if you can't find the report and you're not reading the report, then what are the lessons you will learn from the report is the question that I had in my mind. And after, if somebody has read the report and there are learnings, the shipping community has learnings, and the shipping community is not alone because you have to coordinate with so many other ministries or other stakeholders, then what is it that you're going to implement of the learnings? We had an Ennore oil spill in 2017, which happened within a month of my taking charge as DG Shipping. There's a lot of it that we learned. Unfortunately, the Indian system, we don't document it. And the documentation should be objective. It can't be from the institution which is dealing with it. So we need stakeholders who need to document it. And after document, there's a lot of learning from it. For the very first time, we could get compensation for the fishermen and for the government for the very first time from an oil spill. But where is the documentation of it? Now, if you look at the larger aspect, that is the Indian context, the larger aspect, if you look at maritime conventions, the International Maritime Organization has several conventions. I think Mr. Raja Mazumdar will be able to tell how many conventions there exactly are, because last known there were 37, but now when I read it, it's a lot more than that with regulations. Now, every convention, every important convention emerged from the investigations and findings of a major accident. So MARPOL, the Marine Pollution Convention, is one of the key conventions which came out of oil spill incidents which occurred in the late 60s up to mid 70s, a whole lot of them. As a result of the convention, the number of oil spill incidents have been reduced, at least the serious ones have been reduced. So that is what we are looking for at this moment. What can we learn and what can we take forward for the future? The Baltimore accident, friends, has sensitized us to the enormity of risks associated with shipping, not only financial, but legal, policy considerations and human considerations in equal measure. I certainly hope that this gathering here with the stalwarts, the doyens of the industry, would be able to take home, to comprehend learnings and suggest measures and ensure that our learnings make sure that we can prevent future accidents, and should an accident occur, we know how to deal with it also. Once again, thank you very much for the attention, your patience, and for the invitation extended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malini Shankar. And she has also given a bird's eye view of the thing, and I could see the DG shipping in her when she pointed out about the report. So this program is also live going, and it is a hybrid program since AMTOI and FFI are also partners, co-hosts here. So there are people viewing it from other places also, and some of the people who couldn't make it here today also we have given the access. So thanks for joining. So we will now move on to the panel discussion. So probably before that, I would request Mr. Kesavan to present a memento to her as a token of our gratitude, and also a coffee table book of the chamber. When we talk about ports, shipping, we cannot but give the coffee table book. We cannot just omit to give the book. This is the history book of the chamber.
This is older than the old Baltimore book.
Should be. Yeah, I'm sure you would enjoy that, ma'am. Thank you. So probably we can move on, and can I invite Mr. S.N. Srikanth, the moderator for the panel discussion. He is the CEO and senior partner of our associates, Chennai, a long-time member, a long-time expert and support to the chamber. Mr. Muthu Jagannath, Director, NAU Private Limited, Singapore. Sir? And Mr. Amitabh Majumdar, Managing Direct Partner, Bhozan Mitra and Company, Mumbai. And I now leave to Mr. Krishnan to introduce them and help to start the panel.
That to introduce the domain expert is not an easy task. But having been ordered to do so, I shall attempt it. The chairman of the session is none other than Mr. S.N. Srikanth of our own Madras Chamber, who also very long time ago headed the logistics committee of the chamber. Well known and well respected, a Bhishma Pitama in Chennai. Mr. Srikanth, sir, is partner, CEO of Hava Associates, India's leading maritime and port consultancy, and investment advisors for these industries. He served as the trustee of the Chennai Port Trust, as a member of the high-powered National Shipping Board, a statutory body to advise the Government of India on shipping and port policy, and he is considered an expert in coastal shipping. He has served as a visiting faculty member in the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He was also on the government's task force to set up Maritime MBA at the IMU. His publication, Strategic Risk Management in Port, originally presented by him at the Imperial College London and published by Lloyd, has received special acclaim. These are but a few facets of a very, very dazzling gem, Mr. Srikanth. I move on next to Sri Muthu Jagan, or Jagan as he is popularly known. He is the director of Now Private Limited, Singapore. He is based in Singapore, and he has been kind enough to be with us today during his other engagements at Chennai. We are very, very grateful and thankful to you, sir. NAU is a maritime claims consultancy adjusting correspondent firm assisting clients in their disputes, H&M, transport liability and P&I claims. Mr. Jagan is a graduate from the JNU and has completed his LLB and LLM from the University of London. He is a specialist and has experience in shipping and chartering practice, NVOCC, freight forwarding and consolidation, shipping agency, liner activities, H&M adjustment including collision, DRC, P&I claims control, defense adjustments. The list goes on, and surely this is just but a glimpse of what this Mr. Muthu. He is an associate of the Chartered Insurance Institute of Singapore, Insurance Institute, member of the Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration, International Malaysian Society of Maritime Law. He is a panel arbitrator at the Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration, China Maritime Arbitration Commission, Dubai International Arbitration Center, Gujarat International Maritime Arbitration Center, and a panel mediator at Asian International Arbitration Center. Truly a domain expert. We are very, very happy to have you amongst us today, sir. He is known as Raja, and he is a Raja. Mr. Amitav Mazumdar, managing partner, founded Bose and Mitra and Company in the year 2004. Mr. Mazumdar is a leading practitioner in matters resulting to casualties, collision, salvage in India, and has represented owners, charterers, salvage companies, and the government, including advising major ports in various casualty-related incidents. Mr. Majumdar has advised and has been a forerunner in drafting the Admiralty, Jurisdiction and Settlement Maritime Claims Act of 2017. He has also advised on the draft Merchant Shipping Bill. He has been the part of the Indian delegation for legal committee meetings in the International Maritime Organization. He regularly appears and argues before the Supreme Court, various high courts, arbitral tribunals across India in commercial and admiralty matters. He regularly represents Indian ship owners and associations in closing deals in Singapore, London, Hong Kong, Greece, Italy, and the United States of America, Dubai, Hamburg, Bulgaria, and Japan. There's no part of the globe that he doesn't touch. Through his knowledge, skill, expertise, Mr. Majumdar has garnered a lot of recognition and has been consistently rated as brand one practitioner in the field of shipping by both chambers and partners and Legal 500 for over a decade. Not to say, Mr. Majumdar is also called upon by MU to train the officials of the Ministry of Shipping on the fundamentals of shipping. We are truly happy, sir, to have you with us. Thank you.
Dr. Malini Shankar, Mr. Kesavan, Ms. Saraswati, Mr. Krishnan, my longtime friend and mentor to the Logistics Committee, Mr. Uday Reddy, and of course, Mr. Raja Mazumdar and Mr. Muthu Jagannath. When it comes to the panel discussion here, and I will include Mrs. Malini, Dr. Malini Shankar, as part of the panel, even though she is in the audience, I believe there are two grooms, no brides, and a chief priest. Why? I will explain shortly. Anyway, container ships seem to be very angry these years. In 2001, of course, as you all know, the Ever Given ran aground in the Suez Canal. Shipping rates doubled, global supply chains were severely disrupted, and many ships were diverted to the Cape route around South Africa, which added an additional 7 to 10 days of passage. On March 16th this year, an incident which did not receive as much publicity as it ought to have, a container vessel, the Yang Min Witness, crashed into a key crane at the port of Evyap in Turkey. Amazingly, 3 container cranes just crumbled one after another. If you've seen the videos, it's shocking in a domino effect. And now, the spectacular collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore after the container ship MV Dali crashed into it. I wanted to show a little video of how it crashed, the whole thing just folded. But I thought that would be too much of an intrusion into your time. Let's talk about the Suez blockage for a minute. Shipping is truly international. The Suez Canal is a hugely busy passageway. I don't know how many ships go through that every day, maybe 50, something like that. It was not designed for 50. It is not, as Mr. Kesavan very presciently remarked, it is not designed, he didn't talk about the Suez Canal, but the passage is far busier than it was ever intended to be. The Ever Given was one of the largest ships in the world, with a capacity of maybe 20,000 TEU or more. And I think it was nearly full. It was registered in Panama, owned by a subsidiary of a Japanese shipbuilding company, time chartered and operated by Taiwanese Evergreen Marine, with technical management under a German ship management company, covered by a UK P&I insurer, with the hull under a Japanese underwriter, and so on. That's shipping for you. It's global, it's international. As for the Baltimore tragedy, I will dwell a little more on it, and some of which may be a repetition to what Dr. Malini Shankar in particular said, but bear with me. The bridge carried the 4-lane Interstate 695, which was used by some 34,000 vehicles in a day. It crossed one of the busiest shipping routes in the world, not widely known, the lower Patapsco River, which connects the port of Baltimore to the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. I have some familiarity because I used to go on an average annual pilgrimage to the Baltimore area for business purposes. And I never really thought that the bridge would collapse, but thank God it didn't when I was visiting. In 2023, the boat handled nearly 500,000 passengers, over 50 million tons of cargo, valued at maybe $80 to $100 billion. It generated $3 billion in wages and salaries. Remember, that's important to a city. $2.5 billion in business revenue, and $500 million in state and local tax revenue. The MV Dali, of course, which hit the bridge is expected to have hit it with a force of something like 12,500 tons. Now that, I'm told, is equivalent to a 100 blue whales hitting you. Now whatever you're comfortable with, you can park your thoughts there with 5,500 tons or 100 blue whales. I have no idea which is correct, but this is what is reported. And of course, the Dali was registered in Singapore, operated and owned by Singapore companies. It was chartered by the Danish shipping giant Maersk, managed by the Singapore arm of an Indian ship management company, many of whom will know who it is. And of course, it was crewed almost entirely by Indians. I don't know whether there was one Sri Lankan amongst them or all of them were Indians. A little bit into the details of the crash. On March 26th, the Dali left the port of Baltimore at 12:44 a.m., bound for Colombo. Once the ship was in the channel, the tugboats were released. That's important. Somebody remarked, couldn't it have been after it crossed? Soon thereafter, the vessel suffered a complete blackout and began to drift out of the shipping channel. And I remember seeing in the videos, the navigation lights went off too, which seemed very odd to me. A backup generator supported electrical systems but could not provide the necessary power for propulsion. At 1:27 a.m., a mayday call was made from the ship to say that the crew had lost control of the vessel and that a collision with the bridge was possible. Traffic on the bridge was stopped immediately. At 1:28 a.m., the ship struck a pier at roughly 8 knots. Given that the ship weighed 100,000 tons plus at 8 knots, that's where the 12,500 ton force comes in. Within seconds of the collision, the bridge simply broke apart. 6 workers on the bridge died. In filing a claim against the two Singapore companies, the ship managers also, the city of Baltimore, said the disaster single-handedly shut down the port of Baltimore, a source of jobs, municipal revenue, and no small amount of pride for the city of Baltimore and its residents. Remember, we are talking to politicians here. They also claimed that the vessel was unseaworthy and that the bridge's collapse was caused by negligence of the vessel's crew and shoreside management. That alarms on the Dali's refrigerated containers sounded when the ship was docked in Baltimore, indicative of an inconsistent power supply that was not investigated and, or if investigated, not fixed. They're closing in. And believe me, there are some very uncomfortable things here. I've not seen, I don't think the engine records have been released yet. People may know better. The city also made several other broad claims against the owner and the operator of the Dali. I'm focusing a little more on the city because you know where the trouble is going to come from. The Maryland General Assembly introduced emergency legislation to provide money to workers and local businesses affected by the disaster. Long-term loans were given to small businesses affected by the bridge collapse, and insured losses could range from 3 billion, as Mrs. Dr. Malini Shankar said, or some estimates say 4 billion plus. I have no idea. Meanwhile, the owners have declared general average. Mr. Majumdar will surely tell you how they can get out of it, and thus making even those cargo interests whose cargoes were not damaged pay for this sordid exercise. Some questions beg an answer. Who is liable to whom and who pays what? What are the limitations of liability? Was it contaminated fuel that caused the loss of Dali's propulsion? Was there a problem with the electrical systems? Was the crew aware that the ship had a problem and with the electrical and propulsion systems? If so, they could face up to a 10-year prison sentence in the US according to US law because it resulted in deaths. Very, very important now was the design of the bridge up to current regulatory standards. Will the city be liable for a bridge not designed for today's commerce? As Mr. Kesavan is pointing out. When it was built in the late 70s, you just didn't have container vessels, definitely not of this size anyway. And the Dali was way bigger than what the ship was designed to handle. A couple of things here. This bridge was not one designed for progressive failure. You hit one pier and it goes because the members are all fixed. But bridges these days are not designed like that. If you hit the pier, one segment will collapse, not the entire bridge. So that design has never been changed. And besides, how do you design a bridge? You don't design it to cater to every eventuality. It's not possible. You don't design it for a 10.2 earthquake, a building for a 10.2 earthquake. So engineers use probabilistic models. And the probabilistic model they might have used in the 1970s could not have ever envisaged a Dali in 2024. So we need to revisit those probabilistic models, and they're almost never done. What should shippers do in terms of Plan B? Mr. Muthu Jagannath has promised to talk about it. It's okay to say the bridge failed, this happened, that happened, my cost went up. But do you have a Plan B? So that's another thing. And of course, what lessons? I'm glad that the Chamber has put this so prominently in their flyer. What lessons can India learn? I think they've not used the word India, but I would choose to stick to it. Now, I did talk about 2 grooms, no brides and a chief priest. We have 2 grooms for the maritime industry, very eligible and brilliant in their spheres. The other side are the structural engineers. They're missing here. They're missing here partly because we're not able to accuse them, and partly because they may turn around and say, hey, why don't your ships have some crumple-free, crumple zones in front? Even cars have it. It isn't so tough. And Rolls-Royce, years ago, developed autonomous vessels which can even berth themselves. Surely, an element of that could have prevented a collision with the bridge. A Tesla car does not collide with the vehicle in front, it slows down. Don't tell me that a 100,000 ton or 150,000 ton ship can't have something similar. So the brides are missing. But the chief priest is here, the vice chancellor of the Indian Maritime University. Who is to pull all these elements together? I think it's ideal for a university like yours, ma'am, to kick that off. It's not going to happen from the maritime side alone. We will be talking about general average and this and that. It's not going to happen from the structural side. They'll be buried in the concrete. So you need somebody to pull all this together. Get the stakeholders together. The United States has a Transportation Research Board, which I had the privilege of addressing once. It was incredible. I've never seen a convention like that. 10,000 people attend. 10,000 people, of course, distributed sessions, but in so many hotels. Now, don't confuse that, the brilliance of that annual convention. You should perhaps represent India one of these days there, with the capacity of the administration to follow recommendations. That's way, way, way down in the US. Perhaps you could moot the idea of something similar to the Transportation Research Board in India, where people can come and present their findings, the various institutions which the government has promoted. They're not actually talking to each other in the manner that they ought to be. And I see no better institution than yours, ma'am, to promote that. And there are so many people here who can play a small role in getting that off the ground. So our 2 experts today, Mr. Muthu Jagannath and Mr. Amitav Majumdar, will answer all the questions, the tricky questions that I laid out. But I just want to add one tailpiece to my question on what can India learn. You see, firstly, many years ago, I used to be a trustee on the port of Chennai. There used to be a floating dry dock here, and the owner had not paid its dues, and he abandoned the vessel. And the port kept raising bills year after year. You owe me this many crores, you owe me this many crores. One day at the board meeting, we were told that we are fighting ICICI in Bombay High Court to take custody of the vessel. So I said, why? We can sell it for scrap. I said, it's been there for years. And the next day, I took a boat and went to the dry dock, and what I feared was happening. It was rusted at every end. For heaven's sake, it could sink. So I sent an SOS to the chairman, please try to lose the battle in Bombay. He said, why? Because if it sinks, it could drift and it could block the channel, something like what happened in Baltimore. And also, where do you hope to scrap the vessel? You can't scrap it in Chennai. Environmental regulations don't allow you to. You'll have to tow it right down south, and the cost of towage will be way more than anything that you can earn from scrap. Alarm bells sounded everywhere. Subcommittee was formed. These institutions are famous for subcommittees. I was made the chair. While we were deciding, it sank. Luckily, it didn't block the channel, but the amazing thing was, soon after, I read in the papers about the heroic efforts of the port to retrieve the wreck. And I was told it cost them some 10 crores. Now, the layers of bureaucracy which come in on top of so many other things. In India, it's almost impossible to claim from a port trust for damage aid. You all know that. Dr. Malini Shankar successfully claimed on behalf of the government for an oil spill, but I don't think we can do the reverse. So we can't, and you can't even dream of claiming from a city government or a municipal government. So the various stakeholders have to be pulled together, and that's not happening. Perhaps the Indian Maritime University could be instrumental in that. So I think with that, I wish the deliberations all success. And we have excellent people here, and Dr. Malini Shankar to give her expert views also. So may the games begin. Thank you. You have the presentation.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank MCCI for having me over here. It's always a pleasure to speak in Chennai. It's sort of a second home to me because I'm here nearly every week in the High Court. I find the gatherings over here extremely well presented. Thank you very much to everyone and thank you MCCI for having me. I think I must thank my Dr. Malini Shankar as well as my co-speaker here for having given a small brief of what has happened. And if I remember correctly, about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a dead ship called the MT Wisdom, which nearly came and hit the flyover in Mumbai, you know, the one which goes from Bandra to Worli. Yes, at the ceiling. And it was over a weekend, and everyone was on their toes because this dead ship was on its way, going to crash into the ceiling, and somehow because of the weather turned out and went on went onto the beach. But so it is not that we have not seen similar incidents happen in our own waters, but what was the takeaway from that, we have no idea because there was no research on that. As Dr. Shankar looked, that she was not even aware that it happened previously. But it did happen. As soon as it didn't touch it, then everyone forgot about it. And then we went on to seeing whether we could collect money from the, it was the first time that we understood that we were party to the fund and we should get some money from the fund for salvaging because there was some reminiscent oil on there. But anyway, but it is a fact that our biggest challenge is documenting what is happening. We have 7,000 kilometers of shoreline. Incidents are happening all the time. But if we could document them and learn from them, it might be the biggest lesson that we can have if such an incident ever took place in India. Now, going back to the Baltimore and the complexities of the Baltimore is, and I will run through a bit of it because we've already covered the basic facts of it, so I won't going to run it, except for this little cartoon which came on. Sorry, I'm seeing it myself, not you. My apologies. Yeah. I don't know if anyone saw this. This came up in the American newspapers. But people forgot that while there were Indian seafarers on board, there were 2 pilots appointed by the US Maritime Administration who were also on board the ship. So it wasn't that there was only the Indian seafarers on board. So that picture that was depicted of the Indian seafarers, I think, is quite objectionable. At least I took it to be very objectionable. And in fact, especially in a place where the president praised the Indian seafarers, because had they not stopped that bridge from closing down, there would be far more incidents which would have happened. So there was a huge amount of effort which was taken in, which is not getting much media coverage. And typically with administration, they're trying to find how to get hold of money to build the bridge, because there are limitations. And everyone is aware of the, I'm sure, of the magic pipes as well, which used to happen in the US. You know, getting in the US and an incident taking place in the US is the worst thing that could possibly happen. You know, you're stuck. Everyone's making money, starting from the smallest service provider to the highest service provider. It's just a money-making racket going on. Anyway. So the Dali, as we have heard, is owned by a Singapore company, time chartered to Maersk, and was one of the largest container ship operators in the world. In fact, the chartering was done by Maersk under the M2 agreement. So in fact, Maersk and MSC both were connected in this. It's called the 2M Alliance. So both Maersk and MSC are likely to have issued their bills of lading, and then there is a lot of NBOCCs. Now, had this been a bulk carrier or a tanker, things might have been a little bit less complicated contractually. But being a container vessel, as you're all aware, the ship owner plays the least role, because they time charter the ship to a major operator who then issues his bills of lading down the line, and then there are various NBOCCs down the line. And therefore, a contractual claim coming up the line, which I'll talk about later, is far more difficult. And I'm sure some of the containers which were on board this are meant for India as well, via Colombo would be coming in, and there would be issues which will arise. So, my apologies. I'm trying to run this with this, which is not. So there are unproven allegations, as we just discussed, as to the seaworthiness. I don't think one should speculate too much on that, except what could be the cause if it was proven that the crew or the ship owner was knowledged with the fact of this incident. If the vessel had been sent out in an unseaworthy condition, what would have happened? As to whether it was unseaworthy or not is a matter which is a fact-finding task, and I don't think any of us can really jump the gun and say, let's blame X. We have to leave that. We can only, today's talk will be only on the presumption is that how it would affect, had it been the ship not been in seaworthy condition when the vessel left. So, seaworthiness under the Article 3 of the Hague and Hague-Wisby rule, as you're aware, is that the carrier shall be bound before and at the beginning of the voyage to exercise due diligence to make the ship seaworthy and properly man, equip, and supply the ship. Article 4 provides the defenses that neither the carrier nor the ship shall be liable for damage, loss or damage arising or resulting from unseaworthiness unless caused by want of due diligence on the part of the carrier to make the ship seaworthy and to secure that the ship is properly manned, equipped, and supplied. Article 4.2 further provides that neither the carrier nor the ship shall be responsible for loss or damage arising or resulting from act, neglect, or default of the master, marine pilot, or the servants of the carrier in navigation or in the management of the vessel, and any other cause arising without the actual fault or privity of the carrier or without the actual fault or neglect of the agent or servants of the carrier, but the burden of proof shall be on the person claiming the benefit of this exception to show that neither the actual fault or privity of the carrier nor the fault or neglect of the agent or servant of the carrier contributed to loss or damage. Pausing here, the reference to this is not to the bridge, but to the containers on board the vessel. The bridge will still have to be built, and the ship owners P&I Club will still be liable. And there may not be a defense for that. There may be a limitation for that, but not a defense for that. But insofar as the cargo is concerned, as a cargo owner, when you are going to sue, if the ship owner or the carrier under the bill of lading are able to get their defense built on this, then of course they are not liable to pay. So it's a highly fact-finding task which needs to be done for cargo owners, and they will need to, of course, show that there was neglect. And I'll come also to the fact of why that is important. Now, what is important is seafarers' negligence and seafarers' incompetence. The seafarers' incompetence would be not available defense, but the seafarers' negligence is a defense for the carrier. So the mere negligence of the seafarer on board the Dali would not render her unseaworthy, and the carrier under the bill of lading can seek to exonerate themselves of the liability of taking the defense under Article 4, Rule 2A of the Hague Rules, which exonerates a carrier for liability for loss or damage arising or resulting from the act or default of the master, mariner, pilot, or the servant of the carrier. A crew member will be competent if he has knowledge, experience, and skills of how to operate the part of the ship for which he is responsible. On the other hand, he will not be competent if he does not possess the level of capacity, capability, or skill to be reasonably expected of the ordinary seaman of his rank. So, in a scenario where the ship owner chooses his crew with due diligence, due care, and made sure that they had the required qualification, knowledge, experience, etc., and provided a vessel which had all the required equipment and document, but the crew did not carry out their duty responsibly, failing either to use the qualification and knowledge they have or to use the equipment provided properly so as to prevent any danger that the ship might face, that would amount to negligence, and therefore the carrier would be entitled to the defense and not incompetence. So one has to be careful as to what would happen. Now, the web of, as I said, the shipping contract, and especially being a container line, is extremely complicated because the number of NVOCC bills of lading which are down the line, there is actually probably no mainline shipping bill which the master has signed where you can contractually go against the ship owner. So therefore, what you have to rely on, if you are an NVOCC or if you are a holder of a bill of lading, which the carrier is someone other than the owner, is what they said in the Starsin is that you will have to prove your claim in tort. You will have to show, because the carrier, other than being the contractual carrier, the ship owner, still owes a duty of care to you to carry the goods properly. And was he in breach of that duty? And if he was in breach of that duty, and you were the owner of the goods, not the endorsee and therefore not the owner of the goods at the time when the incident happened, you also have a claim in tort against the carrier. And that is what in a container line one would have to try and build up to see. And of course, there would have to be the burden to show whether the tort whether there was a duty and whether there was a breach of that duty. So for example, the duty to have the vessel seaworthy when it was leaving, was that there or not there? Was this the cause of it? These will have to be dealt with as and when the incidents happen. But for a NVOCC cargo receiver with the NVOCC bill of lading, or even an MSC bill of lading, to go and try and get hold of the vessel Dali may be a difficult task. You may have a prima facie case, but eventually, if there's no privity of contract, and unless you've made out a case in tort, you will have that much more difficulty to claim against the carrier. You may be entitled to claim against your NVOCC carrier, but that NVOCC carrier may just be a piece of paper. You know, it could be someone who's based in Dubai with nothing, and you will find, you know, I have a claim, my container carries a $2 million goods, which is, you know, now totally useless to me. You will not be able to, you can sue the NVOCC carrier, but you can't sue the carrier, the ship owner, unless you're able to show that they had committed a breach of a duty which they owed to you. And that at the time of the damage which took place, you were the owner of that good. Now, in a lot of these cargo cases, what happens is the cargo make a claim to the insurance company. And the insurance company needs you to act as a prudent uninsured. And therefore, now the insurance companies are becoming cleverer, and they're saying, have you initiated action? Because there's the 1 year time bar, if you haven't covered it within the 1 year time bar, etc. Pausing here, may I just correct a situation, because a lot of people ask me this question in a bill of lading claim. Under Indian law, the 1 year time bar of the Hague-Visby rule only applies to export cargo and for coastal cargo. It does not apply for inward cargo. For inward cargo, it's a 3 year time bar under the Limitation Act. Because our COGSA, Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, only applies to outward cargo and coastal cargo. It does not apply to inward cargo. For example, the English COGSA applies to both ways. Secondly, even if by contract you try to incorporate the Hague-Visby rule into your bill of lading, so the second argument which is made is, well, you know, the bill of lading has Hague-Visby rule. Hague-Visby rule has a 1 year time bar. It's contractually incorporated, or even if COGSA doesn't apply. Indian law does not allow you to contract out of the Limitation Act. So any provision of anything, the Article 6 bis is considered to be void when incorporated into a contract where you're trying to limit the time bar, because no one can contract out of the Indian Limitation Act. So it's very important for you, because this is, if anyone has a claim on this particular Dali ship, is that it's an inward cargo, so you have 3 years time bar. So you don't have to rush into getting into filing your suit, so that you have a 3 year time bar. You can work towards and get your necessary claim. So we talked about the NVOCC, and this is the biggest thing with container lines which you will face, especially in these complicated. There's going to be hundreds of bills of lading down, which has nothing to do, and you have to link it all up, going up the line, and you'll have different scenarios. You may have scenarios where the receiver has rejected the goods because it's been delayed, so title goes back to the shipper, and the shipper is still holding the bill of lading. He has not given it. He may have endorsed it. It could be sitting intermediately in the bank somewhere, in the banking system, where the bank is holding it and the receivers rejected it, the shippers caused a problem. Different parties may have claims which will come up. Right? It's not a simple case of a whole ship of corn coming where there is only two receiver or one receiver and it's very easy to deal with. You have hundreds and hundreds of possible claimants who could be coming and making claims. And in any jurisdiction, unlike a bulk carrier tanker whose routes are very certain, A port to B port, container line ships go around to 15 different ports, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then eventually come in. So, the exposure is tremendous. So this comes to general average. So in a situation like this, the ship owner will usually declare general average. Now, general average is basically that I'm going to be spending a huge amount of money. I need security and contribution towards that, right? So the Grace Ocean PT owner of Dali declared general average pursuant to which, cargo interests must contribute their proportion of salvage costs. In an overwhelming majority of cases, when general average is declared on container ships, the salv value of containerized cargo is exponentially higher than the salv value of the vessel. So accordingly, the overwhelming majority of general average contribution comes from cargo. So it's very typical. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say if I'm carrying salt, which is a very low cost product. So therefore, the cost of a whole ship worth of salt is less than the value of the ship. Then, of course, in a general average contribution, the ship owner's contribution will be higher than the cargo owner's. But in a tanker, the cargo is exponentially higher than a ship. Therefore, the ship may be worth 15 million, the cargo is worth 200 million. Then the salv cost, whatever the cost is, the contribution will be far more from the cargo owner than the ship owner. In a container vessel, you don't have just one person. You have lots of people. So every container, every owner of those container and the cargo inside it must contribute towards the salvage, right? And without getting that bond, which you don't pay first, you just give a bond with a supporting insurance certificate, that bond has to be given for you to get your cargo. There is a lien, there's a ship owner's lien over the cargo until you give that bond. And if your cargo is insured, the insurance companies all know about this. So they know that they will have to give it. We've come across lots of cases where people don't want to give it, and then there's a huge ruckus which starts up. Because if you don't want to give it, and I'll come to that, you have to prove that the general average incident hasn't taken place. And therefore you have to go into court and prove that. So that takes a long time. So your cargo will just be sitting there. Which is why the Jensen clause came in, that you're not going to argue about it and you're going to just pay the bond, get the cargo. The issues of liability will be decided later on. So party declaring general average will have to establish that he has had a sacrifice or expenditure is extraordinary. The sacrifice expenditure is intentional. The sacrifice expenditure is for the common safety of all property, ship and her cargo, and not just part of the property. And the purpose of the sacrifice expenditure is for prevention of a peril. It is these four things that they have to prove to get a proper general average. Now, therefore, when you declare general average, it's only a start. You get the bonds, you give the cargo, the general average adjuster does the adjustments, and then any cargo person can challenge that. It is not that you have to accept whatever the general average adjuster said. You can always challenge that, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, you must put up the bond, take your cargo, and let mercantile trade go on, as it were. So Green Ocean ship owner of Dali would have a possessory lien over the cargo. The cargo is only released against a bond. The general average bond would be usually counter-secured by a general average guarantee. A general average adjuster is appointed, and then the adjustment takes place. Now, the average adjustment, are prepared on an assumption of liability. Right? It's on an assumption of liability, and never seek to determine that liability as per the case of so and so. However, even if cargo interests are not personally liable, after the publication of the general average adjustment, they are under obligation to furnish security in relation to their share and then challenge it if they want. One of the other parties who, of course, also will be party to it, so it's not just the cargo and the ship. The ship is time chartered by Maersk. The bunkers on the ship belong to Maersk. So to the extent of the value of the bunker, even Maersk will have to participate, but only to that extent. So I've already given an example of what I just gave of the tanker or the salt. So here is a general example of what would happen if the cargo was worth 80 million and the ship was worth 20 million and the total salvage cost was 10 million. What would be the apportionment of the salvage? And one must remember, for salvage you can never have limitation. There's no limitation of liability for salvage. So rights to contribute in general average shall not be affected through the event which gave rise to sacrifice or expenditure may have been due to the fault of one of the parties to the common maritime adventure, but this shall not prejudice any remedies or defences which may be open against that party later on. So the object of Rule D of the York-Antwerp rules is to keep all questions of fault, alleged fault, out of the adjustment, and to preserve unimpaired legal position at the stage of enforcement. A fault is a legal wrong that is actionable between the parties at the time when the sacrifice or expenditure is made. So if the casualty gives rise to the need for extraordinary sacrifice or expenditure, I've gone through this with you again, so I will not repeat it. So then comes the Jensen clause. Now, as a general rule, the shipowner is not entitled to general average contribution from cargo when GA event is caused by shipowner or his agent. To circumvent this general common law rule, the contract of carriage provides that cargo interests are required to make a general average contribution, even in case where the extraordinary expenditure was brought about by the shipowner's negligence. And this has been recognized by the United Supreme Court in a case called the Jason. However, if the extraordinary expenditure was required because the shipowner failed to exercise decisive due diligence to make the ship seaworthy at the beginning of the voyage, then the cargo interest is not liable to make a general average contribution. And if you see all the newspaper articles, everything, the emphasis is all going on that when the ship left Baltimore, it was not seaworthy, because that's what they have to prove. If they don't prove that the ship was not seaworthy when it left Baltimore, and there was actually, it's an accident, it's an electric fault, it could happen at any time, then they can't get out, then they have a full defense, the owners. Then they can't say that when you started the voyage, the vessel was not seaworthy. Now this now comes to what are the damages that you can claim as a cargo owner. So you have physical damage or loss. Let's say there's reefers on board, the electricity is now gone. All that cargo probably is damaged because there's, all the reefer cargo is certainly gone. Or there may be perishable goods on board which is coming from US to India, and by the time it will reach India, it will not be worth what it is. Then there's economic loss as a result of the decrease in market value because of the time of expected delay in delivery. This is going to be one of the largest claims that could come in, that you had a time-sensitive good which came in, and therefore you want that. And then there's the pure economic loss, where by way of example, an industrial plant cannot operate given the parts of an essential machine are delivered after date of delivery, again, which goes back to the date of delay. So the liability of the carrier for delay in delivery is the most difficult one, because no bill of lading contract specifies that I will deliver your cargo within X number of days. So the test, of course, is, was there reasonable time within which you came? If there wasn't a reasonable time within which you came, then you can say that, yes, there was a delay beyond reasonable time, and therefore I have lost the market value of what I had bought and wanted to sell it, and therefore I should be compensated. Now that's a matter of fact which has to be proved in court, but there is no underlying obligation which the ship owner has said that I will deliver it in 30 days or I will deliver it in 20 days. Right? So again, it becomes an issue which needs to be proved. And in a lot of the NVOC and a lot of the container bills of lading, there's a specific clause which says that I will not be liable for delay. Because I may have to detour, I may have to go somewhere else, I will not be liable for delay. So therefore you've contracted out of delay, as it were. In fact, in the in our Indian Marine Insurance Act, Section 55(2)(b provides that unless the policy otherwise provides, the insurer on ship or good is not liable for any loss proximately caused by delay, although the delay be caused by peril insured against. So therefore, you have to be very careful as to what is the clausing in your bill of lading. If you have cargo on the Dali which is coming, you need to turn around the, you have to look at the first page. People always say that the first page of the bill of lading is where we fill it up. Actually, the second page. Because going back to the old English laws of carbonic, smoke ball, etc., where they said that, the terms of the contract must be known before you enter into the contract. Therefore, if you see a bill of lading, the Gen Con bill, you'll see the page which has got all the filling up on top will say page 2. Page 1 is the terms. But we always take this to be 1 and that to be 2, but in fact, page 1 is the terms, page 2 is where you fill up all the details of what is being carried. Then comes the limitation of liability. You will have two regimes of limitation of liability. One is for the vessel owner will try to create his limitation of liability. And of course, there's the package limitation of liability, which also will be there. So that will be the next defense. If they fail in the defenses of Article 4, then they will then rely on, if the cargo is so expensive, then they'll rely on the defense of under the limitation of liability. And I think Mr. Muthu will do a lot of the limitation of liability, so I'll leave that to him. So at present, I think they're trying to limit liability to $43 million for a $3 billion claim. So, which will be interesting to see. I don't think the Americans are going to allow that to happen. I think they will get their bridge, whether they like it or not. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think the advantage of being the second speaker is when you have someone like Raja speaking, I don't need to really cover much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Yes? A bit more louder, okay. Sorry. Can you hear me loud and clear now? Perfect. So I think a lot of things have been covered, and my intention is to speak from a trade practitioner. First, I must thank the Madras Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. It's wonderful to see such a big audience. I was actually surprised, and I hope that I'm able to deliver what you all have come here for. Yes. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a practitioner. I handle claims. I've studied law as a second degree, and I deal with claims on a day-to-day basis. And it's not, you don't really look at what is right and wrong. You need to find a solution. So I'll speak from that perspective. Yes. Please take it with a pinch of salt. If you want legal advice, go to someone like Raja. He will be able to guide you. Although, majority of what I speak will be on the basis of English law. Law is not static. Every country has got some quirks. There are different types of law, civil law. If you go to Russia, they got communist law. So things are different. So what is right in one jurisdiction may not necessarily be right in another jurisdiction. You need to play the game. Yes? So the first question you have to ask is, will this happen again? Yes? I think you can learn a lot from this incident, and I'm sure that they will make, changes. There might be a convention, there'll be this, to avoid it. But the long and short, you will have outrages like this. It's going to happen again and again. You had the, the Ever Given. Before that, you had you had the COVID. These are fantastic events for some people to also make money, also learn. Look, if you have got the stress test there. Yes? So, if you are in a business in which you need to ensure your supply chain works, then this is the real deal. You need to deal with it. If you look at risks, there are some risks which are known. There are some risks which you think you know, but you actually do not know what is the severity, and there are some which is unknown. Like in this case, we've been talking about fuel, right? If you go for low sulfur, you sometimes find that there are issues and there is an outage. Yes, you really don't know many things. You built a bridge in 1970s. Like I said, I really don't go into details. But at that time you built, you didn't really think that you're going to have a 6,000 or 7,000 TEU vessel. Yes, so things will happen. We need to deal with it. But yes, when you start planning, I think in the ideal world, it is quite possible to try and plan ahead, 20 years ahead. And that way, I would probably say Singapore thinks on this. And I'm not trying to sell Singapore. You look at the airport of Singapore, they're already thinking that's going to be there 20 years down the line. You're going to do it. Not everyone has the flexibility. Most of these places are already built up areas. Yes? So what are the strategies? You can outsource, you can insource. You can have multiple suppliers. Fortunately, all these incidents, they have been sorted out in a very short period of time. There would be, issues related to it, but if you really want to plan, you need to have multiple strategies to deal with it. What is the best strategy? It depends on the industry, where you are based. I don't have any answers to that, but perhaps, you could consider that. I believe that the majority of the crew on board this vessel are Indians. Unfortunate thing is, whenever you have an incident, there is a human element, they generally become pawns. And, I will probably give the example of Hebei spirit. A lot of master mariners are here, so they will probably be able to explain to you on that. The master and the chief officer were actually detained for many, many years for no fault of theirs. So what happens is, at least, whichever country you have a political situation, the easy example I could give is when elephants dance, ants will get trampled. Yes? So I hope it doesn't happen. My heart and soul is with the crew. I hope the Indian Maritime, associations make sure protect their brethren. Whichever way, I think we should try and avoid that. But this is something which is of great concern. And I hope, the crew are not merry pawns for the issues at hand. Will there be disruption? Yes, there will be disruption. I understand that Baltimore, there is a fair bit of coal which is imported from Baltimore to India. I believe it's about 1 million or 2 million per month. So you would have a fair disruption. But there are alternative ports, so it's possible to move it to different terminals to try and export it out. But there would be an increase in cost. The increase in cost might not come immediately because in your sale contract, you're already provided for it. But the next time, there's no free lunch. You need to try and ensure that you can recover it. So there would be some impact. Delay, there's going to be delay. And due to the delay, there's going to be increase in cost. Because what happens is your ton miles, if you're going to go a different terminal and there's no capacity, then there will be some sort of an outage, there'll be some sort of a congestion. There's going to be increase in cost. We need to live with it. The other issue on delays, if you really look at it, like Mr. Majumdar said, in delay, you cannot, it is not covered under marine insurance. But if the delay is so much to frustrate the adventure, there is a potential to claim, in the Institute Cargo Clauses A, provided it frustrates the adventure. I'm not saying you will be able to, but there's actually a potential. You've got cargo underwriters, perhaps they will, be able to guide you on that. But there is a fine element, but it has to frustrate. So only in the ICCA it's possible. Otherwise, delay is something which the cargo insurers will generally walk off. But yes, getting a delay claim is difficult. So I think you need to, if you believe that your startup, your factory is going to have an outage, there are other insurances which you should consider. It is not going to be on a cargo insurance to deal with it. He's already spoken, Mr. Majumdar has already spoken on GA and salvage. I could probably speak on it for hours to hours together. It's a very interesting topic. Cargo interests will say, why should I pay? But let's put it this way, it's basically an allocation of risk. When the ship owner did the voyage, he's only taken a freight for the risk which he has, been able to understand. If something extraordinary happens, then that's the reason how you allocate. It's based on equity. Now, I'm not going to talk on GA, but I'm going to talk about the itsy-bitsy part, security. Following a GA, if you are insured, cargo insurers generally provide something known as a average guarantee. And the cargo interest, the shippers or the importers provide something known as an average bond. It goes in tandem. But please note that provision of a guarantee is not a right. Some cargo insurers may refuse to give it. In which case, cargo interest would have to provide something known as a cash deposit. Already he is suffering due to this loss. He is going to have another stress. Put security. So at least after this talk, you would choose your partner. You will try to find out what would he do if there was a loss. Does he provide a guarantee as if something happens? The other thing you have to understand is even if your insurer provides guarantee, ship owners may refuse to accept it if they feel that the insurer is not properly secured. That's the reason you go to brokers who will probably say he's there are different rating agencies. They would probably, you're giving a piece of paper. So the time when the paper has to be used and there's no money, then it's of no use. Yes. So I have seen instances in which it's quite possible that the owners are not comfortable with the insurer security and there would have to be other alternate ways to deal with it. So I think the trade should understand how it works, try and deal with this before it happens. There is a potential to defend a GA contribution from owners. But in such a big incident, owners would, if they are entitled to limit liability, that's what they have done. What would then happen is, any, a redressal or to avoid the GA contributions, that would go on a liability claim. In which case, you'd only get dollar to a cent. In the sense, you'll have to be compacted the same liability, whichever limitation convention is there. So you would actually feel in these type of things, the property interest would still have to contribute. There's no potential or there's very limited potential for a recovery. There are two limitation issues. One, you've got the cargo conventions. Today, I learned that India does not allow as far as import is concerned. I think Malaysia has the same, contract act, which is there. And perhaps you'll see an article on that. It's interesting. I didn't know this. That's an advantage of coming to such talks where you have someone who will say the itsy-bitsy part. But there is another issue. Even if in India you want to go and actually argue that, listen, the time bar is going to be 3 years, are your courts prepared for it? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I'm sorry if I'm right, because there is so much of pendency in the courts, it will probably take too much time to deal with it. But yes, it's a good argument to try and look at the cargo conventions. The reason I was coming to the cargo conventions, you will generally find you have the Hague rules, Hague-Visby rules, and Hague and Hague-Visby. Hamburg and Rotterdam are still not so much important, but when we talk about US, this was a shipment from USA. Automatically, the US COGSA would apply, which is the 1936, which provides for the Hague rules with some, specific thing like $500 per package. The advantage of the Hague rules is time bar is, the limitation is available as of right. So therefore, if you are using US jurisdiction, if someone is able to say, It has to be only done in US. You can actually limit liability at $500 a package. If it was Hague-Visby rules, because now we are trying to say, listen, it does not apply, you have to come to India, and it's contractually not agreeable, and then it becomes a different issue. Even probably would argue that the limitation will not have. But like I said, the Hague-Visby rules allows you to break limitation if the carrier was reckless. So this is something which it is important, because intermediate carriers, they may not be entitled to the ship owner's limitation defense. They would have exposure. I think this exposure will come if someone is smart enough. I'm not going to go after owners because I'm only going to get dollars to a cent, because he's going to limit liability. I'll go after the intermediate carriers. I'll say I'm not bothered, and then you will have a gap, you will have to pay it. If the intermediate, when I talk about intermediate carriers, includes VOCC, vessel operating common carriers, NVOCCs, freight forwarders who issue their own BLs, which means they become NVO. There is a gap, even consolidators. So you have a gap there. I think people have really not understood. You need to take insurance to look at your stress test. What is the maximum, exposure any one bottom? That's the way you would probably look at it. Then you've got ship owner's liability limitation. I'll come to that later. I've got in the next slide on this. If you look at the dispute resolution aspect, you will find there's a host of contracts in this. You will probably find there's a charter party. Invariably in a charter party, you would see an arbitration clause. It would have ESMANI, Society of Maritime Arbitrators in New York, or LMA or SCMA clause, which allows you to, the owners and the charters will be able to deal with the disputes. Insofar as the bills of lading contracts are concerned, I have been a proponent to try and get arbitration clauses put in the bills of lading. Not been successful, but some of my clients have started putting in it. There are a lot of advantages of doing it. Otherwise, you will have a host of jurisdiction clauses. You probably have a jurisdiction of USA or Germany, and someone from, if you are from India, you probably have to go and deal with it. The costs of pursuit in courts are not cheap. In some countries it is cheap, but there's a lot of delays. Recovery of costs is also another thing. In some countries you are entitled to get 60 to 70%. But in some countries the recovery of costs is very limited. So there are tactical advantages to having arbitration, but the downside is, even carriers can go after, the cargo interest, because arbitration has different pathways. Smaller claims can also be dealt with it, can be done faster. I think my view is we need to deal with disputes. We need to look at arbitration insofar dispute resolution is concerned. So this is insofar as the carriage of goods, bills of lading contracts is concerned. What about general average? General average is actually is actually declared by owners, not by the contractual carriers. You will generally find a clause saying that general average as declared by owners. There is no provision of as for dispute resolution insofar as GA is concerned. If it was a bulk trade, you would probably say that, listen, it should follow the charter party, which provides for a dispute resolution clause. But arguably, when you're dealing with an owner who is not a party to the bill of lading contract, or he takes a right only on general average, you have some difficulty. So generally what would happen is you would probably use the admiralty jurisdiction of arresting and founding jurisdiction. You will do all the song and dance routine if you want to try and deny it. Or you would voluntarily agree. Now, I'll give the example of Ever Given. In the Ever Given, the owners sought, guarantees and bonds, but with the LMAA clause. Now, my view, again, I'm not a lawyer. I can probably say anything and get away with murder, so to say. My view is it was deliberately done because owners wanted a duty of confidentiality. Because don't forget, owners paid something to Suez Canal Authority, and that is not in public knowledge. If that money is going to be reapportioned in general average, they are to declare it. So my point is, I want GA claims to also go into arbitration, but with sufficient safeguards. Because GA goes on equity, fairness. So it cannot be, people should not use tactical advantages. So I think my view is, yes, you should have arbitration, but you should have a pathway which takes care of it. We are not ready for it. Hopefully the next time the York-Antwerp rules are relooked at, perhaps they may have a specific rule in the numbered rules, how GA would be dealt with as far as disputes are concerned. But as of now, there is no specific rule. So you generally, it's what the owners ask. If you don't have the muscle power, you generally agree to it and live with it. If you look at the US, generally, I think it's the 1851 Limitation Act. The way you could limit liabilities on the basis of the vessel, post-casualty, plus the freight. So I think it's 40 or 60 million, I think, give or take, 5, 10, it doesn't make a difference. Because the cargo on board that vessel with at least, the last time I did a calculation was on the basis of $20,000 to $30,000 per TU. But because this is cargo coming from US, I would expect it much more. I would expect it at least to be more than 150 to 200 million. So you would probably find, the Limitation Act, you would probably do it. And you also lump in all the other liability claims, the pollution claims, anything going after owners. So if the owners are entitled to limit liability, well, they can walk off at a figure which they are comfortable. The main important thing of the US Limitation Act is that only owners and managers are entitled to limit liability. So therefore, the charterers, operators, NVOCCs are out of this limitation. Yes, so the only limitation they can probably have is the cargo convention limitation. Yes, there's a big gap there. Yes, so I don't know, it might be tactical that they deliberately went to US. Now, there are other limitation conventions. You have the 1957 convention, you have the 1976 convention with the 1996 protocol. The 1957 convention is for a lower limit, but it is generally easier to break. The 1976, higher amount, but very difficult to break. Singapore, on the other hand, is actually a signatory to the 1976 with the 1996 protocol. The vessel is registered in Singapore, so tactically it could have also been possible for the owners to try and initiate limitation action in Singapore. Yes, but the advantage of the 1976 is charterers are also entitled to the limitation defense, which is not available in the US or the 1957 convention. So you have this, song and dance which is there, which, people will work to try and get it done. I think, like I said, these things will happen. You will have gaps. You will have to deal with those gaps. Like I said, if you want to go also for your recovery, your insurer will pay your claim, but he'd only be looking at his subrogated claim. He's not going to look at your other losses. So you are going to have gaps, so you have to deal with it. The only way to deal with it is have a stress test. What will happen if this happens? If you are fortunate that you don't have those issues, fine. But if you feel that there's going to be a stress, you need to deal with it. I'm not going to be, telling it's not going to happen. Things will happen, otherwise I'm out of a job. Yes, so things will happen. You need to be prepared for it. It's important that you choose your right partners because it's a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. Develop and maintain relationships. I'm telling this again and again because if someone calls me in the middle of the night and I'm happy with a client, I will stay awake and try to think through. So price is not the only determinant. Find someone who gives you value, who understands your business and works with you. Because when these things happen, it becomes too complex. It's not an easy job. I think that covers what I wanted to say. Always have plan B, plan C, and plan D. Yes? One of the advantages of coming from India or Malaysia or Philippines is we are conditioned to it. I don't know if my bus will come in time or not. So automatically you already have those plan Bs so that you can reach there. Yes? So we have that instinctive reaction to do it. And that's the reason whenever you have a big casualty in India, you are able to deal with it. But yes, we need to have a safety culture that it doesn't happen in the first instance. But if you really look at how we can deal it, because you already think of plan B and plan C. So in business, also think about this so you can deal with it. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure speaking to you all. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muthu and Raja and Mr. Srikanth for the brilliant presentations. We are running slightly behind schedule, but we would like to have some interactions with the audience. Shall we open it up, Mr. Srikanth, or would you want to ask any question before that? We can start with the audience. Yeah. Yes. Yes, sir. Mike. We'll pass on the mic if you want, or
Good evening. I'm the odd man out here. I'm a civil engineer, and as somebody mentioned, I did my graduate studies in IIT Madras, same as alma mater. So my interest is, I'm a demolition expert. Most of the demolitions you have seen in this TV in Noida and Kerala, and I'm the consultant to IIT also on some large demolitions that are coming up for engineered demolitions, like outdated thermal plants and so forth. My interest is when there is a disaster, I'm called by the Ministry of Urban Ministry to come and help on search and rescue and so on. The first thing that happened, and I also track disasters around the world just to learn and document, not just within India, but outside India also. When the Dali incident happened, the first question was, some people gave a narrative, could this be a sabotage? It was in the press that could this be a sabotage? They wanted to rule out sabotage. As a structural engineer who have made my own analysis on the 9/11 World Trade Center collapse and so many others, there are certain things that you people in the maritime industry should look at, in my opinion. Though NTSB is coming out with a fantastic investigation, and I'm watching the salvage. As we speak, they are going to blast the bridge to bring it down. I have seen many bridge collapses in India. Bridges under construction collapsing, bridges almost ready to be inaugurated collapsing. They all attribute to certain things. But in this bridge, there was no redundancy built in. We always say today in structural engineering that you must build a redundancy so that it doesn't go for a progressive collapse. Two important words. They didn't do it. So you can go to Baltimore city and say, you guys did not do it. Even in the 70s, I was a graduate student in the US. When this bridge was built and inaugurated, they would not have built in the redundancy thinking a ship will hit. So whose fault is it? You can think of that. My second point is, they've used the technology of using concrete piers and steel bridge. Steel bridges were very cheap. US steel was very cheap at that time, so they promoted a lot of steel bridges. You can see some of the oldest bridges are made of steel. But they used a system called the pinned joint, which is you tap it, it will fall down. Second observation which I feel. If it had been a concrete bridge, this would not have happened, if a redundancy was built in. And the protection island, I looked at the drawings, I looked at the Dali's dimensions and the protection island, grossly insufficient. The naval architecture drawing shows the Dali's shape, the front of the Dali is quite long compared to the back of the hull. And even before the island was touched, the whatever you call it, the bow would have hit the bridge, which is the wrong design for the bridge, for the boat in question. The shape is incompatible for the island designs, which city of Baltimore have not upgraded the island. But they allowed the ships, they got the revenue. So, of course, somebody already mentioned this is not designed for big ships like this. Correct. They were not designed for big ships like this. Impact design. We always have something called the impact design. Even for the World Trade Center, there was an impact design, but nobody imagined that a fuel-laden aircraft will go and hit the... If there was no fuel, it would not have collapsed. It would not have burnt the steel. So the impact design may not have been done for a ship impact like this. So anti-collision device, good. You mentioned, Mr. Srikanth. We should provide anti-collision devices. Why not in the ships? So these are my few points I thought I should share from the structural engineering or civil engineering point of view, because the bridge is involved, I'm here. If two ships had hit in mid-sea, I would not be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very, very valuable, interesting inputs. We appreciate. Any questions from the audience? Any other questions? There is a question online. I can just read it. This is from Mr. Ashley Anthony. Whether general average is applicable in the subject Baltimore incident, because GA is applicable as per York Antwerp is only when any extraordinary sacrifice or expenditure is intentionally and reasonably made or incurred for the common safety for the purpose of preserving from peril of the property.
Presently, yes, because it's not just.
Present. Hello?
He's able to
Presently-
hear? He's hearing? Yeah.
Presently, the answer would be yes, because there is going to be a expenditure which is going to happen with the Dali, and therefore Dali will want to recover that expense from the cargo. Whether it falls within the 4 questions to fall within general average will be decided later on factual matrix or what exactly happened. But as of now, yes.
Can I add to what?
Yeah, please.
I think what happens is everyone only focuses on rule A. If you really look at York Antwerp rules, invariably they are contractually incorporated in the bills of lading or in the charter parties. The latest edition is 2016, 1994 is the most commonly used. You need to take both the numbered rules and the alphabetical rules. Rule A is basically defines general average, but if you take the numbered rules, they give examples. So if you have any incident which follows what is there in the numbered rules, then the owners have as of right entitlement for contributions. So in this case, I believe there would be expenditure to ensure that the voyage continues, which were not contemplated at the
Salvage costs.
yeah.
To get the ship out.
So these costs would come. Salvage cost rule 6 of the, if you look at the numbered rules, it's there. So owners have an entitlement. We will see, it keeps us all busy. So how it works. Thank you.
Hope Mr. Ashley got his answer. Yes, Mr. Bala. Mike.
So it takes me to a different aspect of law.
Cabotage.
Cabot emptor. Basically, the buyer should be aware of what is buying.
Yes.
So, even though the port authority has had different effects, which I agree completely, I think they're fun. Before a ship takes a port of call, I'm possibly extending beyond the frontiers, shipping, under the contract law. You are supposed to have seen the place and brought your vessel. Now, I am not exonerating the liability of the port authority, but if I were to argue as a lawyer, which doesn't happen, port authority, I would say, yes, probably mine is defective. I'm not exaggerating for that. But you should have, with this type of cargo composition, etc., you should have checked. But I'm going beyond the brief, but I'm just saying, now that then brings to the next question. Right? This is one aspect. When the insurance, you file a claim on insurance, or we call it P&I, whatever. No lunch is free. Then should I go back into the Proxima cost and say, insurance firm, can I claim on the defect of the port authority? I stop there, but because it goes on and goes on. It's a mischievously loaded question, but I'm just trying to put the cat among pigeons.
The answer to your first question would be that, of course, in this case, the ship was leaving the port, not entering the port. So there was no question of him knowing. Of course, he must know, the master will know where he's going, etc. So far as the insurance aspect is concerned, this is something I tell all insurance companies, Because they come and shipping matter, they say, now we will sue the ship owner. An insurance contract is very different to my right to sue the ship owner. When I take an insurance contract for my cargo, I have taken insurance for certain perils. The peril happens, you pay me. There's no question. Fire takes place, you pay me. Now he says, oh, now I want it from the ship owner. Fire is a defense. The ship owner may not have to pay you, but doesn't mean that the insurance company will not pay you. The insurance company has to pay you as per the insurance contract. That is totally independent from his or the original right of the cargo owner to also claim money from the ship owner, subject to the defenses available and on a complete different law. So insurance companies' payment obligations are completely independent and they should not link it up with the ship owner's liability. That has nothing to do with it. An incident which I have taken insurance, a peril which I have insured against occurs, that's the end of it. He must pay me.
Having said that, I stop here. Having said that, suppose you put myself in the shoes of the insurer. Can I then say, without knowing the full facts, I'm making an assumption, the proxima causa, what's the most proximate cause which has caused this?
For the insurance company, it doesn't matter what the proximate cause is. For the insurance company, is it an event which is covered under the insurance, peril covered? That's it. The statute governing insurance, marine insurance, is very different, and the institute clause is very different to the Hague-Visby rules, etc., which is a claim against the owner. There you might go into proximate clause, there might go into negligence, there you might go into the knowledge of the carrier, whether the defense is allowed under Article 4, that's totally different. The insurance company who's insured your cargo will have to see a peril took place, is it covered, pay.
I understand what you're saying. So you're only talking about insurer cannot accept as long as it's watertight. I mean, the clauses are covered, but how you recover it is a different ballgame altogether. Correct? That's what I was only trying to put
That's
that
right.
point. Right?
Can I add one? I think from a adjuster's perspective, if you really look at the P&I and H&M insurance, they are on named peril clauses. As long as you have the peril, that's what Mr. Majumdar says, it's covered. If there is no peril, it's not on an all-risk basis. Although there is a Norwegian clause which is there. As long as the peril is in place. Your first question, and I want to be a bit naughty, so to say. The Baltimore, people want to sue and they want to get the jury. So it's not your view and my view which is going to be important. It is going to be the view of the man on the ground. I don't think they have my views. So I think, you need to be realistic on that. I just thought.
The crown shall do no wrong.
But again, I must clarify that a P&I cover doesn't work like an insurance company. It's on a pay-to-be-paid basis, so it is very different insurance again.
Just we can take one online, then come back to you, alternate. So there is an online question again. What will happen to ship master and does he has any protection? Ship master.
In my experience in American jurisprudence, the ship master, depending on how the trial goes, is usually the person who's affected the most. During the magic pipe cases and where there was no death, it was just misrepresentation, just not even the misrepresentation in America. It might have been that they allegedly threw some pipes in Saudi Arabia, did not put it down in their book, and that book was given to the Coast Guard, and therefore that constitutes a crime. The master goes to prison for at least 6 months.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. We're talking about ship. So I thought as a ship master, I can share some of my experiences. Now, I've been to United States so many times. I see several ports, the gear, the loading gear, they're all, designed somewhere in the 70s or probably, 60s, late 60s. And we, as shipmasters, are expected to go alongside the berth and face immense difficulties loading a cargo. The loader cannot do this, loader cannot do that, or the jetty itself is so small that it cannot accommodate a ship. And these are the difficulties a shipmaster faces, or ship's crew face, Even for example, this Ever Grace, now it is found out that the ship, for such a big size of a ship crossing the canal, it would be advisable to have a tug escort. But we are thinking about it much later. And even in this case in Dali, we are saying that the tugs should have escorted the vessel right up to the bridge or clear the bridge and then let go. But in many US ports I have seen, the concept of nobody even thinks about tugs escorting a ship passing under a bridge. I've passed innumerable number of bridges, under the bridges. But I've never had any tug assisting me to take care of these, events, So, we all know, only when something happens, we wake up and say, this is not done, that is not done, So something as what do you call it, risk assessors or being people from the insurance, you should think about this and make the operations in ports much safer, especially from the point of view of the master or the ship's crew. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe related to that, there is another question online, Mr. Kapil Dev. Can the Port Authority be faulted for allowing such a large, fully laden vessel to transit under the bridge without tug escort? Is it feasible to design any bridge such that it can take the full impact of a colliding, fully loaded ship? I think
They will be the expert witnesses and we will interpret what they say.
May I attempt an answer?
yes, sir.
Firstly, the Dali was not fully loaded. And secondly, if you design a bridge to cater to the impact of just about any ship that you allow it to pass under, the bridge would not exist because nobody can afford it. That is why, as I was mentioning, they use a probabilistic design and they estimate what is the probability of a particular force impacting on the bridge. And if it's just 1%, 2%, 3%, they will definitely not build for that. Of course, that's long past in a case like the Baltimore Bridge, because designed in the 70s, when vessels of this kind were not there. But the short answer is, no, they cannot design for every vessel that will hit it.
Thank you. Mr. Krishna? Yeah.
I'm Edarasu. Actually, Captain was mentioning about the port nowadays. India ports has emerged as a global benchmark ports now. Last 25 years, the ports right now, the cranes and the equipments well designed, and we are on par with the international standards. Yes, after the public-private partnership, Indian ports are now benchmark in terms of safety, in terms of performance. So we are even, I would say, better than global ports. That's where it's there. I agree with you, like 1970s, we used to have really issues related to the equipment. Equipment were not adequate, and equipment were outdated, but now all those ports are absolutely in tandem and latest cranes and equipments all, and also the design of the ports. I think what our civil engineer was saying, like what we are just recently going to build one port in west coast of India, which is Vadhavan port. It's a $10 billion port, which is emerging, which is going to be the largest port in the Asia. So likewise, things are moving. And I think that's where I just wanted to amplify here.
One minute, sir. We will pass it on. The last question will be his. Oh, okay, you are.
So my question is to Mr. Muthu. You're talking of plan A, plan B, plan C. As an Indian importer, should I look at the port where my cargo is going to be put on board? Should it be a riverine port or on the coast port? Would that make a difference in my decision where I want my cargo to be shipped out of?
I think when you do risk analysis, you would have to, you got it correct. When you do a riverine port, then you have you have other element which is there. you would go to a risk manager or a risk person who would probably put a schedule and he'll mark it on risk. I'm not someone who does it for a living, but there are people who do it. And they look at the risk and say, listen, this is the percentage and this is what I would do it. And then you will factor in the cost. You can live a very absolutely safe life. You need a tank to walk in the roads. It's going to cost to buy a tank. So you need to factor the cost and you will take a judgment. When I say plan A, plan B, plan C, if you are in an industry which requires fast moving consumer goods or your industry is going to have an outage, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And people learned it during the COVID time. So I think what I'm trying to say is, don't only look at price, make sure you can take care of the stress. Things will happen. I'm not here, I'm more of a reactive. I deal with claims, but you need to be prepared. And if you are prepared, you can deal with it and move on. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is to Mr. Majumdar. A hypothetical event, if that MK wisdom had hit the ceiling, how would you compare the outcome of that with the outcome of possible outcome of this Baltimore case?
Ideally, I would not want to think about it. I use that bridge regularly, and I can understand but yes, there would have been quite but the only difference is, of course, that was a ghost ship. There was no crew. That was a ghost ship which just arrived from the Middle East. And we actually first thought that maybe it's a terrorist ship coming in with, and then no one was on it. And it just came and went onto the beach.
If it was not a ghost ship, if it was a...
I think there would be a lot of questions asked. I think the authorities would certainly take, it would be a major. I don't think I'm faltering the US federal government or the state. I think we would have done exactly the same things. I'm involved in many casualties and the same process takes place. Crew are kept for a long time. I think it's unfair to say crew are immediately allowed to go. I have had investigations where crew have been kept for up to 2 months, especially with death involved, because then the police gets involved as well. And then in some cases, the crew are kept for 6 months. And I've looked after crew for 6 months and then had to go to court, get bail, and then get them out. I mean, we've had sad situations of crew from countries where the country don't even want to take them. And we've had to take them, do all the work for them. And they've literally cried on our shoulders saying, thank you so much for getting us back into, and the authorities, let's say Indian authorities 15 years back and what it is today is completely different. It is a far more approachable situation now. I know when there is a situation where there were 2 ships, one Vietnamese ship and one Indonesian ship. So the Indonesian ship had hit a coral reef in Andaman and the crew were taken in and the crew were there for nearly 2 years. In the meantime, a Vietnamese ship had the same thing, but the Vietnamese ship crew wanted to get home, so we were instructed by lawyers, by the club and everything. So the Indonesian crew also came on board. They said, you also apply for us, their managers. So we applied in Andaman, in Port Blair High Court. And I still remember this. And when we were fighting, I'm talking about nearly 18 years ago. And the policy was, let the ship be there because then the owner will come perhaps. Let the crew be kept here, then the owner will come. But no owner came, and there are high court judgments that you can't now criminalize seafarers following the IMO regulation, etc. But these seafarers were there. And eventually we got them out. And I still remember the judge telling me that I'm going to impose costs on the government to pay for their airfare. I said, please don't do that because then will be another 6 months. They will challenge that and we'll be sitting here. But we got the crew out and the Indonesian crew didn't want to leave. They said, we've been here for 2 years, we are married, we've got children here. He said, you're now getting us to leave this country, but I've got family here. But things have changed now. People are looking at it. But I don't think you can just it's a major accident which has taken place. There has to be investigation which will take place. Investigation is going to take time. It's time sensitive. And people have to be given time. I think the same thing I would say when we do, and if this were to happen in India, we can't say, let's say if it was Ukrainian crews or Russian crew, we can't just say, okay, go take them home. We need their inputs. We need, and everything has to be structurally understood what happened, where it happened. So it takes time. And so I would say that it would be more or less the same.
You wanted the last question, please.
I'm Captain Mehta. Mine is not a question. Mine is that first thing that there is local administration and somebody is responsible for disaster management. And bridge constructed long time back, of course, we can't visualize so far ahead that what size of ships would be. But this gentleman or this authority would know that what the bridge is constructed for, and if we want to increase the size of the ships coming in, we need to have a risk assessment and have the corresponding things in place for that. And for which I would say that it was necessary for them to have a escort tug all the time there, irrespective of the cost. Because if they want to bring a bigger ship inside, and local authorities they know they are responsible for disaster management as well. You cannot say the percentage or say very, very less. But you know, if I want to have a bigger ship, I need to have a risk analysis. I need to have the things in place to counter that. Local laws are superior to international laws.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of the program, so can I invite Ms. Malini Shankar to come to the head table, Mr. Krishnan, Mr. Uday, and President. Before I invite Mr. Uday Bhaskar Reddy and Mr. Krishnan to say the concluding words, can I please come to the stage, yeah. And Mr. You're in the chair, Vice President. Mr. Uday, you come. Yeah, but anyway, we'll take a group photo also after that. So just have 2 more chairs, please. Yeah. Sorry, we are troubling you. So before I invite Mr. Uday Bhaskar Reddy to give the word of thanks, formal word of thanks and conclude, let me request Mr. Krishnan to present a memento to all the wonderful moderator and the panelists, and please give them a big applause. Sir, please come to the podium. Thank you very much. Can I now request Mr. Uday Bhaskar Reddy to say some concluding words and also a big word of thanks to all of them. Thank you very much. Sir, group photo.
More to record your presence. Good evening to all. Now we've seen some varied observations and a variety of reach which we have got through this evening session with Srikanth setting in the tone and comparing how the grooms are ready and the brides are not there and the priest is there, but what to do, who's going to tie the knot, and he gave some lovely examples on to understand it and to kind of capture it, saying with the seriousness on how this trade operates. And of course, we were taken through the legal channels, even though Mr. Majumdar captured all the sections which are relevant for the trade to know. It only kind of makes it difficult to understand when one wants to do business. No one wants to read the sections before sending their merchandise. Yes, of course. All they're going to do is call a legal expert like Muthu sir and ask, okay, boss, I'm going to send this, can I or not? So all he will say is, yes, do, I'm here to take care. So it's not in the lighter vein, we are saying that everyone's taking their own interest out here, but the truth remains that, the practice remains that. Now, we had captains, those who were on the ocean, those who have steered vessels, giving their side of what it is, what it was in the US when he was behind the wheels, what it is when he was behind the wheels. But the truth remains, all of us are learning, and it is a continuous process. It can be Baltimore, which is an accident. It can be a Red Sea caused by someone else. It can be an Evergreen in the canal, anything. It's only kind of a saying in logistics like never a day is the same as it was yesterday or it's going to be tomorrow. So that's the sum up of the session which we've had here. The idea of the logistics committee of the chamber was, and which was steered by Sri Krishnan once it was tossed, is that people should know the difference in a situation when it comes with a claim alone or a general average situation. Like how Mr. Muthu highlighted, how Mr. Majumdar highlighted, who has the authority to declare a general average? What is the onus on the cargo owner on what he can claim, on what are the limits he has? Like he gave a beautiful example. There can be a fire. Your cargo has to be compensated by your insurer. But general average is different. It's part of the ship owner's kind of a decision, or the owner, charter parties and owner's decision to declare it. So these are thin lines of difference which we need to know as we are entering a global situation of doing commerce, and we are exposed to huge responsibilities. There are situations where, there are a lot of large chains where if you don't deliver on time, you're susceptible to claims. So we've gone beyond all this, and we are here. Now we don't know what the vessel had Dali in those thousands of containers, whether hundreds of Walmart's container would have been there, hundreds of any other large chains business would have been there. And not only those businesses, the consequential damages, like they were mentioning about how much disruption it caused to the coal movements which were leaving the shores of the US. So such were the discussion, and different points and different angles were covered. Hope all of us have, and I'm sure all of us are going to take home some different opinions and points to ponder upon. As I said, it's not going to repeat, it's not going to be the same. I sincerely, on behalf of the Chamber and the Logistics Committee, would like to thank Dr. Malini Shankar, IAS, Vice Chancellor, Indian Maritime University, who has been our keynote speaker. And I thank Sri Ennarasu for connecting us with her and making this possible. I thank Sri Srikanth, the CEO, Senior Partner, Horus Associates, for spearheading this evening's session. He's always been Chamber's man to go, and he's been the same. Thank you, sir. I thank Sri Muthu Jagannathan, Director, NAUPT Limited, Singapore, for consenting to be a speaker. It was nice of him to have taken time on his travel. I again thank Captain Ramakrishnan for connecting us with him and making it possible. We thank Sri Amitwa Majumdar, Managing Partner, Bose and Mitra Company, Mumbai, for consenting to be a speaker. It is also heartening to know that Chennai is his second home, other than the business which brings him. But yes, we are happy that you are part of Chennai already. We thank Dr. Swaminathan of IMU for connecting us with Sri Majumdar and making this happen. And we thank our co-hosts, AMTOY, Naveen is not there, and the Federation of Freight Forwarders Association of India, and our own governing council members, our sponsors, Royal Sundaram General Insurance, Satwa Logistics Group, I think we should write in Hindi or Tamil the name, not in English. Shiksha Logistics is a lovely name. Ritiksha Air Logistics, Air and Sea Logistics Private Limited, E-Seal Store. Representatives of various member industries, representatives from shipping and logistics sector, representative from airlines, designers, press and media, and last but not the least, our own chamber secretariat for pulling this wonderful evening together. Thank you one and all for joining us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem. I think we don't have the record. Janagana mana adhinayak jaya he Bharat bhakya vidata Punjab Sindhu Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utkala Vanga Vindhya Himachala Yamuna Ganga Utsala Janati Taranga Tava Shubha Name Jage Tava Shubha Ashish Mahe Vyage Dava Jaya Gatha Janagana Mangaladayaka Jaya He Bharat Bhakya Vidata Jaya He Jaya He Jaya He Jaya 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 He. Thanks everyone. Please have some refreshments outside. You please stay back for a group photo, please. I would require my team members to come to the stage. Loganathan, Madhu, Suresh, Vasumati. Come, where you have to come up. Nandini. Just come up.